Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Monday, June 21st, 2021, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
A, go Suns, because apparently they're doing very well right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And B, yay for microphones that are turned on.
Yeah, absolutely. There may or may not have been a bit of a microphone
a good half hour of troubleshooting trying to figure out why I couldn't hear Logan. Oh, it's because a microphone was not on. That'll do it.
Yes.
That is definitely
who could have known. But yes, all the microphones are working, all the headphones are on, and we are out here to do a podcast, folks. We got a fun episode ahead of us, but hopping right into it, I thought this is a fun little one to kind of look at and ponder. I originally saw it as a Greg Miller tweet asking about kind of if PSX were to happen this year, what would you want from it? Trevor then linked the GameRant article that it kind of spawned the seed potentially by Richard Warren.
Yeah, that was making the rounds yesterday.
Which kind of goes into how PlayStation Experience may be making a comeback in 2021. It hasn't happened in four years now, going on since 2017. But maybe it's finally the time for Logan to go to his first ever PSX this year. That could be a lot of fun. But Trevor, you've been to a couple, at least one, two, I think, PSXs.
I've been to all of them. PSX was my very first show, yeah.
I know, that's what I was gonna lead into here. So what kind of are your PSX? What makes it different than other events and trades that you've been to? Obviously, first off, and second off, do you want it back? And if so, what do you want it to be if it does come back this year?
I mean, yeah, I would love to have PlayStation Experience back. It was the very first show I ever went to. Back in 2014, I had my first. Not my first, but like a big boy job where I was 5 months into a new job where I was getting I was earning twice as much as I'd been earning prior to that. So I basically treated myself. They announced this PlayStation Experience thing is going to be up in Vegas. Vegas is a 6-hour drive for me, so I was like, I'm gonna go up there. I haven't been to Vegas in a while, and I love PlayStation, so I'm gonna go check this thing out. I'm gonna go see what this thing is, and I got to I walked in. And just kept walking up to the front row and sat down in the front row next to what turned out to be some Bloodborne developers, and got to sit front row at the keynote of the very first PlayStation Experience in Vegas, and had a great time with it. It was like the show was designed for the fans. It was effectively. What I would find out would be a very similar format to like a PAX, because they had a show floor and they had panels and obviously the keynote with like their big announcements and stuff. And then that was the I remember walking in that hall and being surrounded by people who love PlayStation, seeing like Greg and Colin having like a line of people just waiting to meet them in the big keynote hallway or whatever, and just thinking like, oh, these are my people. This is really cool. Being surrounded by this, I would love to do this. And like, I came home and I wrote a handful of like IGN blog posts about my time at PlayStation Experience, and that was like, I had already been keeping a blog on like theater and stuff here in the Valley as like a fun little writing exercise, but PlayStation Experience was what got me into writing and wanting to talk about and cover games. And then like fast forward 4 months or whatever, and I went and spent a butt ton of money to go be on Kind of Funny's Gamescast, and that was my first podcast ever, and then have continued going, or would continue to go to the PlayStation Experiences following that, the one in San Francisco the next year, and then the two in Anaheim in 2016 and 2017. And I would always also kind of plan around when it was in Anaheim, I went to the Game Awards and PSX, and usually planned like a Disney trip around both. Like it'd be like, oh, Game Awards on Thursday night, Friday night would be Disneyland, Saturday, Sunday was PlayStation Experience, and then like Monday I'd do another day at Disney to like wind down and just make it like a fun little weekend. Obviously, given that the kind of funny community that I kind of spawned from is so PlayStation centric from their history with Beyond and stuff. Like, I've made a ton of friends at PlayStation experiences or at various kind of funny events. So it was like another great opportunity to get all of us in the same city and hanging out. We always joked about it, like that the PSXs were basically like the kind of funny .5s for each year. You'd have like Kind of Funny Live, and then Kind of Funny like 1.5 was the PSX show, and then Kind of Funny Live 2, and then so yeah, it's something I've certainly been excited for, and like honestly, I would just love them to bring it back and just be like, hey, here's a handful of our big titles. Like I played Shadow of the Colossus at one of them, and they had like Uncharted 4 multiplayer back before that game came out and stuff like that. So like one or two of their big heavy hitters as like a big showcase on the show floor would be cool. But then outside of that, just like they always had a really great showing from indie developers and stuff. I remember the first one playing Severed on the Vita, and then like 3 years later it would come out or something like that. So it was a really cool experience, and mostly just getting to hang out with like friends in the community. I met Chloe at one of those, and like that was like where basically like Chloe reached out because I was at Disneyland, and she knew that other people in the Kind of Funny community were there at Disneyland, and we hung out for a little bit, and then I like ran off to the keynote or something that night. But like then she was hanging out with us the whole rest of the weekend, and so like friendships have been made at those events, and when they stopped doing them when they didn't do the one in 2018, everybody was like really bummed, and so yeah, I've just kind of missed those, obviously even more so in this last year or so where we didn't have anything really. But yeah, they're a much more focused, obviously like E3 or PAX kind of show. So if they can do it, and like and they they were shows for the fans. They had some hits and misses and stuff. Like the first year I remember it was like they were celebrating the 20th anniversary of PlayStation, and so they like announced and unveiled their special 20th anniversary limited edition PlayStation 4 console that like anybody at the show couldn't get because we couldn't get like the Wi-Fi wasn't working or anything like that, so we couldn't actually like go online to buy it if we were there. So it's like but I think they like learned from that and tried to improve things year over year as a result. But yeah, it's definitely been a fun show, especially when they did it in Anaheim. There was a much more like laid back and kind of chill vibe to it, especially like on the main stage where they'd have like just piles of beanbags that people could just kind of hang out and chill at, if they wanted to hear Greg interviewing somebody from Naughty Dog or whatever it was. So yeah, that's, I think, like I would love to just kind of see them bring it back and be like, hey, here's an hour keynote announcing some of our big things like Last of Us Part 2 or like Uncharted Lost Legacy. I remember that being like a crazy keynote, when like it started with Lost Legacy and ended with the tease for Last of Us Part 2. And then just even that, like being in the room with that as somebody who never got to really experience like an E3 conference in the room, that was easily the closest I'll ever get to those kinds of things, of like everybody losing their minds when like the Firefly symbol came up on a stop sign and stuff. So yeah, I would love to see that, as well as like highlighting just PlayStation being weird. That like in that same year we got freaking Knack 2, I think, got announced, as well as was the Disc Jammers or something. So it was just like a 1-2 punch of Kind of Funny in jokes and Giant Bomb in jokes, and like it was just a great time, and like the people in that community loved what we were getting. Gio up there with the Vita and talking about here are all the games coming to Vita and stuff. And obviously it's a very different PlayStation now, but I'd love to see them revisit that. Like I know people will talk about the idea that there aren't really personalities at PlayStation anymore, because you've had like people like Gio and John Drake and Adam Boyes all leave the organization for other
like
pastures and stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got like Shuhei there, like even Sean Layden's not there anymore and stuff. So
yeah, I was gonna say Sean Layden.
So the argument I have against that would be, yeah, the faces aren't necessarily the central office corporate PlayStation people, but you have Cory Barlog, you have Neil Druckmann, you have Herman Holst, like who can all go out there and be a face of PlayStation, even if they're basically out there just to talk about whatever game they're working on. So like having Cory come out and talk about, we're sorry we had to push God of War Ragnarok out of 2021, but here's a look at what you're gonna get, in the coming year.
Kojima even, yeah,
would be a really cool thing. I mean, yeah, like Kojima obviously was, he was there at that last at the 2017 one, because they had basically just, I think, announced the like the collaboration or something like that, or the collaboration got announced basically like at the the collaboration got announced like the year of the Anaheim one, I think. That was also where we saw like the first first Final Fantasy VII remake like gameplay stuff. So like it's just a really cool. It's basically another E3 opportunity for PlayStation, and just outside of the bubble of E3, in a time, especially then when we wouldn't usually get big announcements or anything, but it's perfectly poised for that, because it's like, hey, here's what's coming in the first 6 months to hold you over until the next E3. So, yeah, I'd love to see it come back. If for no other reason than to just have a great excuse to go hang out with a ton of people and go visit Disneyland and stuff.
I've never been to Disneyland. Yeah, I mean, for me, as someone who's never been to PSX, but has kind of, has been to the various PAXs and has gone to kind of fun events and all that kind of stuff, it is like, outside of E3, it is like the big thing I've gone to that maybe out of all of the events I would most love to, I think, like it, because it is such a, by the nature of what it is, such a celebration of PlayStation and all things PlayStation, right? And as someone who's been, been a PlayStation gamer for 20 plus years now, right? Like that runs, very deep into kind of who I am as a person, who I am as a kind of critic and consumer of video games. To say nothing of the fact that it's all those small moments, right? Like it's being in the audience, hearing like, or watching the reveal of like Last of Us Part 2, or Uncharted Lost Legacy, or Final Fantasy, or Kojima walking on stage, whatever it might be for whoever kind of is in that audience for the thing, right? It's Vita Lives, right, with Geo. It's all those small things, right? Because one of the things I love about PlayStation is that I really do think it has the biggest kind of breadth of diversity in terms of the kinds of games and experiences it's offering to its players, right? Where it's, if this isn't meant to be Trevor and Logan's weekly attack on Nintendo, but if you play Nintendo games, usually it's a very, those games have a very Nintendo feel to them, and this isn't a bad thing. It's just Nintendo obviously been very successful in that, right? Microsoft, they really have like 3 franchises, so if you like Gears, Halo, or Forza, you're pretty set. Whereas I feel like PlayStation has always kind of really enjoyed this fact that they have such a weird, eclectic mix of things that don't always work. They don't work a lot of the times, in fact, but the fact that they just try that, I've always found really endearing, right? Like especially like the PS1, PS2, even part of the PS3 era, where they were just so weird, and it was so fun and so refreshing, and like everyone could find something they loved there. But I feel like I would really love to be in kind of that atmosphere to PSX, right? Where just everyone is just kind of excited and loving this thing together, right? Like that feels like a very like intoxicating atmosphere to be a part of, right? Like a very kind of like enjoyable, fun, like easy kind of group of people to just kind of interact with throughout like a weekend. To say nothing of the fact that it has always been one of the weird kind of questions I've had of why did PlayStation stop doing PSX, right? Like I'd really love to have been a fly on the wall, like when in 2018 they decided to not do it, right? And then 2019, and then obviously it couldn't have happened last year, but because it just seems like such an obvious thing especially with their decision to kind of veer away from E3, right? Like, they don't have an E3 showcase anymore. Why not have that be in December or November at PSX? Like, why not have that be your whole thing? Because that was the point. Like, for the first couple of years, they had E3 where they shared with everyone else. And then at the end of the year, they had the thing that was just theirs all by itself, right? Like, own that moment again, right? Like, and you to say nothing of the fact that you get all that money. That's all the money is for you. Like, I can't imagine they were making a loss on the PSX shows at all.
I mean, I can, which is like that's the thing that like we just don't often talk about, because like renting the Anaheim Convention Center is probably, especially like the last couple of years, and then Moscone in San Francisco the year before that, and like paying to get all of those developers down there, like there's significant cost behind it, I'm sure. And so maybe
unquestionably that
maybe they were operating at a loss, but the hope was like, you know, the news cycle and stuff like that was helping them. So it's like, I don't, obviously like that's the biggest element that I think could be a factor, is that, hey, if they were operating at a loss, then they probably said, well, maybe we don't need to throw this giant event. We can still do state of plays and get, you know, the same level of hype built up for a lot of these things, just without the, you know, in-person component. We'll have the games shown off at PAX events, so people still can get their hands on. Especially because I think that was also the year, like 2019, I think was when they had like the truck going around and stuff like that. So like the reason they didn't do it in 2018, as they said at the time, was like, hey, like we don't have a big slate of announcements to make something like that worthwhile. And so I was looking to see like what they had in like 2019, and it was like, you know, your Death Strandings and stuff like that. They didn't have much from the first party lineup in 2019 particular. So like it might have made sense that they took that year off, because they were clearly, you know, starting to ramp up for like a PS5 and stuff like that. And then obviously not doing it. Like 2019 would have been a year they could have brought it back, but again, like where does that fall in terms of like because if they'd done it in 2019, they could have shown off Final Fantasy VII Remake, they could have shown off Ghost of Tsushima, but then they basically knew that the end of the console was coming. So, you know, if they like the thing I thought would have been really, really cool if they could have done it would have been a 2019 event. They brought it back, and that was when they did the reveal of the PlayStation 5. But we didn't get that for another 6 months. So clearly, like, didn't make sense in their timeline of things. So now, much like, you know, the original PlayStation experience started a year or so into the run of the PS4 life cycle, maybe it would make sense for them to bring it back now that they've got stuff coming out for the PS5 or stuff to start showing for the PS5, especially if they can get it on shelves, to start really, you know, building up. Here's why you should own a PlayStation 5. Here's why you should be in the PlayStation ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just really excited about it. I think that it, even kind of mention it, is exciting in its own right. Presumably they'd have to make an announcement somewhat soon, because we're, you know, halfway to the year now. But yeah, I would love the PSX to be kind of brought back. It would be something that, I mean, they've definitely announced it very late before. I just don't think they'll announce it in like August or September again. Yeah, I mean, I would love a PSX. I would love to see, especially because I feel like we're at such an interesting point in the PS5 / like PlayStation life cycle, right? Like the PS4 era has wound down, is ended now. The PS5 is starting, but I feel like a lot of the franchises and teams and devs are all kind of in this in-between state, right? Like we're not going to get anything from Naughty Dog this year, but you know what they do next, right, is an open question, right? With Uncharted having been sunsetted, I think The Last of Us haven't been sunsetted, right? So what would they kind of do next, right? Looking forward, right? You have God of War that could probably be something at a PSX. You've got, you know, all of these different, now my mind's like racing with all the different teams, and it's really exciting, right? Like, what is happening at PlayStation, right? Like, I think they can really seize that moment and be like, hey, like, this week's news cycle is just us, and it's just us saying all of these exciting things and all the things that we're kind of looking forward to doing, right? And I know that some people don't like when, companies announce things like 4 years in advance. I've never hated that. I am a sucker for get hype moments. I love get hype moments, especially PlayStation, who, yeah, they announced some of these games like 4 years in advance, but they also nailed all the games. So like, why do I care, right? Like, I think I would love to get like a look at what they're doing and what they're planning for the next couple of years. And I think doing that in this kind of celebratory thing where they can acknowledge, yeah, like here is the like 25th or 26th anniversary of like the PS1, and like just celebrate all this stuff, to me seems super cool. And yeah, I'm really excited for PSX in whatever form that looks. But with that said, Trevor, do you have any final PSX thoughts before we pivot?
I mean, we didn't really dive into like the news that's like prompting all this speculation.
Thing we'd like, yeah.
I mean, not even like what. Yeah, it's because the whole thing is the reason this is coming up is basically like PlayStation renewed their trademark on PlayStation Experience, on the branding of PlayStation Experience. So people were like, hey, maybe that means they're actually going to do one this year. But it could also just very easily be like, hey, they just want to keep
just renew
the naming rights to that thing as a potential future thing.
To me that doesn't mean a lot. I mean, I guess I'm sure there's someone at PlayStation who's like, we could do it again, and why would they ever give up the thing? They'd want to just keep that in their back pocket.
Yeah. It's a great event, and I would love to have it come back just purely selfishly and because it is a very like personal to my story of covering games and stuff. So it'd be fun to like just return back to it, but if we don't get it back, then so be it. I'm still tempted to go out there to California for the Game Awards this year, because Jeff Keighley did come out and say that that's going to be back this year. So, maybe that'll be my trip to get back out to Disneyland too. And if I could throw in a PlayStation experience, all the better.
All the better. We shall see. I'm sure we will have updates on that as they come. Our second story for the episode, though, is one that I find really interesting, actually. As someone who has always kind of loved the idea behind Assassin's Creed games, right, of delving into these kind of historical eras and historical locations and weaving your way through these like iconic landmarks and monuments and like locations, especially after the introduction of the kind of, I always forget the action group, just like the kind of like tourist mode that they have in Origins and Odyssey, where you can kind of get like the guided tour through everything. It only made sense we'd eventually see a story like this one, which is that Assassin's Creed Valhalla is being used to attract tourists. This is a piece from Kotaku, which kind of goes
the Discovery
into how
tours.
Ireland's...
Sorry, it's the Discovery tours,
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. How Ireland's tourism board is working with Ubisoft to get more people excited about the country. This is by Zack. Zwiezen, I would pronounce that as Zack. It to me is the obvious logical next step from kind of the Discovery Tour thing to being like, come to our location because this game is rad, right? Like, it's the same thing that I think people kind of saw last year with like, oh, I would love to go to Japan after playing Ghost, but this is, everything's shut down right now. But like, video games can be such an amazing, I think, advertisement for these locations to travel to and visit to and want to just be, I think, reminded of what made you fall in love with the game, the character, and the world to begin with, and then go there, right? Especially for locations like Japan for Ghost, or for me in particular, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I fell in love with the ancient Greek world, right? Like, I did just think about like, man, it would be amazing to go to Greece, right? Like, it would be amazing to go here, and even more so after doing this giant epic tour throughout the Greek world, right? And having the Discovery Tour that kind of weave everything through and show you all the cool spots and all the cool locations, right? Like, this to me is like the logical next step of just being like, just saying, hey, look at this game. It's really cool. It's set in our city or our country or our region or whatever it might be. Come here. Play the game and come here. It's just like that, but real life, so better. And you can see all those ruins of what they look like now. Not that I really think Ireland is really, missing out on too many, tourist stops. It seems like a pretty big tourism spot. But, there was just a global pandemic happened. I'm sure everyone that uses tourism for the industry is devastated. And so, yeah, it just seems like such a great thing to appeal to a younger demographic, right? This to me makes so much sense, especially as video games kind of become more immersive and real and, photorealistic and graphically beautiful, right? It's you can get such a good visual, I think, feel for these places, and then to be able to go travel with them and then be able to kind of advertise that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, even before they started doing the Discovery Tour stuff in Assassin's Creed has always been the poster child for that kind of stuff. I remember playing the Ezio games and being in Italy and thinking, oh, this is really cool. I haven't been able to, I've never been able to get to Italy. So running around the Colosseum, as Ezio was a ton of fun. Or, as much as I hate Unity, it was still really cool running up and down the Notre Dame Cathedral
Eiffel
and stuff
Tower,
like
probably.
that. And because Eiffel Tower was not yet built in.
It'd have been before the Eiffel Tower. Yeah.
I mean, well, there's
French
a
Revolution.
part of the game that takes you to the Eiffel Tower or whatever, but it's more of hey, the Animus is glitching, and so now we're in the future where the Eiffel Tower is a thing. Those still cool elements of getting to run around these, these far off places and these exotic kind of places. And yeah, as you touched on, global tourism interest in Tsushima was through the roof last year when Ghost of Tsushima came out.
Yeah.
And yeah, they couldn't capitalize on it because of the pandemic, but everybody was like, oh my God, this place is so beautiful. How cool would it be to go there?
I would love,
even,
yeah, right.
Even stuff playing the Persona games or something and walking up and down Shibuya or something like that is really cool.
Yep.
It's, simply a significantly stylized version of, those places, but it is, as games continue to develop and be, just pushing, the edges of graphical fidelity and stuff like that. I still go back to when I thought the really cool thing that's going to really push VR over the edge is going to be when VR is essentially, tourism from your home. When you can plop on a headset, either an Oculus or a PlayStation VR device or something, and, walk into the Sistine Chapel and look up and you're seeing, the Michelangelo, the work and everything like that. Getting to do that from the comfort of your own home is, I think, something that will, revolutionize what tourism looks like, because you will have places like the Sistine Chapel or the tourism of Ireland putting together these showcase things and selling them for $15 on a VR shop or something like that for the people that you would love to go to Ireland but can't afford the either the time off work or the lengthy and expensive plane tickets out there. Getting to experience those things in the next best way is, I think, going to be really, really cool when we can get to that point. And I would have liked to have seen it us get there sooner after the kind of excitement around VR a couple years ago, but obviously that didn't happen. So maybe the next time VR really starts getting in the mindsets of people, that'll be a next potential option. Because we also see concerts and stuff setting up VR cameras and being able to attend like you were there kind of experience. So I think that's just the potential for tourism, and this is kind of a stepping stone to that, taking this Assassin's Creed Valhalla video of here's Eivor walking around these places and then showing those real life places, showing that the camera footage of those same locations is really cool. So yeah, I'd love to see that. Especially I have always loved Ireland since I actually got to go there.
Yeah.
It's a
You've
place
actually
I've
got to go to Ireland,
wanted to go back to. Yeah, it is constantly the like answer I give when somebody's like, where would your dream vacation be? I'd be like, as somebody who grew up here in Arizona, going to Ireland and immediately just being surrounded by more green than I've ever experienced in my entire life is an experience that like still sits with me 18 years later after I first went.
Yeah.
So I would love to go back someday.
That nerdy site in Ireland,
Amy
2022
Gills.
live coming to you. Yeah.
Amy Gills
Oh,
put us
that's
up.
right. Yeah, absolutely. That alone makes it worth it. Yeah, to get to see Amy Gills again. Yeah, so I think it's rad, and I want more of it. I also think, as an aside, I would love to see more games do discovery tour things. Like, I would love if like Ghost did a discovery tour of like Tsushima and like take you around the island, even with it just being like the, I think like 1300s version of what that island looks like. I would love that. Right, like it's such a cool, accessible feature, and especially for someone who, loves history, right? Like who's one of my great passions in life is history, right? And the study and love all these kind of ancient and not so ancient places and locations. And I think having discovery tours on these games shows history for what I always say that it is best told as, which is a series of stories, right? Like it gives you history as stories, which is all history really is, but that is something that is so often forgotten when it's taught. And I think it's such a easy, accessible way to get people into history and to get them more curious about these real life places and real life people and real life events. And so using the Discovery Tour modes as a teaching tool, which I know that some teachers do, I think is a super cool feature that, again, can use something that kids and, I mean, hell, at this point, like people in the 30s and 40s and 50s are used to, which is video games, and lower the barrier of entry into kind of understanding our past and how it's connected to the present. And I think the Discovery Tour modes in Assassin's Creed do that absolutely brilliantly. Otherwise, though, that's it. I have a shout out. Trevor's got a mystery shout out, so he gets to go first. Trevor, what is your shout out?
Yeah, so my shout out is just this IGN article. I've seen it making the rounds elsewhere as well, but Square Enix reportedly co-developing a Final Fantasy IX animated series. Basically, a report has come out that French studio Cyber Group Studios is reportedly teaming up with Square Enix to make a new animated adaptation of the story of Final Fantasy IX, which was the last of the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy games. It's one that doesn't get like a ton of love in like the remake conversation, especially behind your Final Fantasy 7s and 6 and 4 and stuff like that. But like it was, it may be chasing the trend of like, let's make Castlevania a show, let's make Fallout a show, let's make The Last of Us a show. But then like there's a handful that also, like, I think Far Cry just got announced
As an
like
Uncharted
a TV
movie,
show
yeah.
and stuff like that. So yeah, it's like, hey, here's a property. These characters, especially like a character like Vivi, the black mage of that game, was very beloved as a character, despite going through like a super existential crisis. And so it's especially interesting because they're saying that the thing is going to be aimed towards children between the ages of 8 and 13, which is probably around. I mean, I was probably somewhere in that age range when I first played the game, so makes sense. But it'll be a nice thing for like my generation of people to like show their kids, people who grew up with this. So yeah, I saw Final Fantasy IX trending earlier today on Twitter and was like, what the heck's going on here? And this was the source of it. So that is my shout out. We'll see if it ever actually turns into anything, but it is a very good game. And I would love just more people getting exposed to it. So.
Yeah. That's a great shout out. 100%. Check out Final Fantasy IX, guys. My shout out is something completely different, totally absurd, and utterly bonkers. It is a Kotaku article by, again, Zack Zwiezen. I would assume it's German-based, so I'm going to say Zwiezen. Call of Duty Warzone players found a door that instantly kills anyone who touches it. I am just going to read the entire opening paragraph because I find it really funny. Again, last week, the new update for Call of Duty Warzone launched. It was the start of Season 4. It's pretty good. Bringing new content to the popular Battle Royale shooter. It also seems to have added a killer door that will instantly end the life of anyone who gets too close. Zack details the door in question, where it's located, and everything involved with this weird feature of the new update for Call of Duty. I find it really funny as someone who plays Warzone, and as someone who just plays video games. It's a really funny story. There's a door that will kill you if you get too close to it, and I find that a really fun. I hope it's totally on purpose. I hope it's not a glitch. I hope it's a real thing that they just thought, let's see who notices this, and then it's become a thing. But I love this whole thing, and it is totally funny to me. It's absurd to me. And we need more murderous doors in video games, I think.
Have you and your squad gone out and have you and your squad gone out and tested this yet?
No, because I only saw it today is when I read it, is when I put it in the thing. So I haven't done it yet, but it's in the salt mine. We go there somewhat often. It's kind of a shit location. We actually don't go there that often now that I think about it. But we will make an occasion now to, I think, find the murderous door.
Yeah, you gotta do it before they patch it out.
I know. Maybe they won't patch it out. That's the hope. They just have a murder door in there. And it becomes a thing of the veterans know about it now, and the rooks. Because it looks like, to me, the video shows it's like a door that you can't open. So you have to just be going in there to hide basically, and then you get killed, which I really love. So I want to give a shout out to that. Otherwise, that's all the shout outs. That's the show. Thank you for listening. You made it. If you like what you heard, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, like all of our wonderful patrons and supporters have. Their support means the world to us and helps keep the lights on and make shows like this and that D+ show happen. So thank you all for that. Really do appreciate it. And again, that is patreon.com/thatnerdysite. You can go check out all of our tiers, goals, gadgets, and whatnots over there. You can also go support us by liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends and family and neighbors on podcast services all around the globe. And going and liking the videos. I have the hiccups. Liking the videos and subscribing on youtube.com/thatnerdysite as well. Otherwise, Trevor, you can go find at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trevor, anything that you want to plug or shout out?
Shout out to the ongoing Summer of Star Wars over on that D+ show. We finished up with the original trilogy last week, which means we're diving into the prequels starting this week. I've already sat down and rewatched Phantom Menace, and that's going to be one to talk about. So we will see where that goes as we continue on this summer, and then this week's That Nerdy Site show, I kind of gave my impressions of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Sat down with Cameron and we talked about that. So go check out those things.
Yeah, you can go find me at LeftyLogie or LeftyLoggy, LOGGY. I will echo Trev's shout out for some more Star Wars. I can't speak for anyone else, but I've had an absolute blast in those shows. They've been a lot of fun for me. I love Star Wars. I love going back to it. Yeah. I mean, so far, we're a third of the way through it roughly. But I've had a blast. I really love the series. And again, I like to say, as someone who has been a lifelong Star Wars and a James Bond fan, I embrace the fact that the things I love are incredibly flawed. It makes it way easier. So yeah, even as we go into the bad stuff now, it's great. It's going to be fine. I will be the most chill about it probably, because I embrace the fact that these things are mostly, at best case scenario, just as much good as they are bad, if not a little bit more bad. So it's fine. I'm excited for Phantom Menace. Maybe less excited for next week's episode. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. You can also go check out myself and Trevor's Let's Plays of Operation Tango. Episode 3 will be going live tomorrow when you listen to this.
Fingers crossed.
If I'm not mistaken with the timeline.
Assuming I get it edited
crossed.
in time.
Yeah, assuming everything goes correct. If not, it'll be go live next Tuesday. So yeah, be excited for that. It was my favorite episode to record so far. It was a lot of fun. That whole Let's Play series has been a lot of fun. That game's really neat. You should all check it out. Otherwise, you can go check out thatnerdysite.com and all the other stuff that I said earlier. Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That News You Care About, play your games and be good to each other. Class dismissed.